Despota bless. It's been. I'm so
Nectarios.
glad that you're here with me today. This is the first interview of Orthodox Traditionalist publications, and our whole objective is to record your memories as you recall them and to put the historical truth out there for everybody to hear. There's lots of revision going on, and all we want to do is the historical truth. I don't want to get into polemicals or jurisdiction blaming or anything like that. I just want to do the history as it is, as Metropolitan Demetrios said at one time on his video. The history, it is what it is, and we can't rewrite history. So with that, I just want to give everybody the opportunity to tell us about yourself, your education. You've been around for a very long time, and we'd like to know more about you.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here with you, Nectarios.
Thank you.
Well, to begin with, you asked about my education. I went to university at Princeton, and it was there that I met our ever memorable Metropolitan Chrysostomos, the founder of this monastery, and who became my sponsor at my baptism, my spiritual father, the head of our monastery, the priest, Igumenos Archimandrite, who ruled over the monastery and had its direction, and ultimately my hierarch. He was consecrated in 1986, and then my brother hierarch after my consecration in 1991.
Oh, wow.
During that time, at His Eminence's direction, actually before my consecration and shortly thereafter, I worked on my doctoral degree at the Graduate Theological Union here on the West Coast in San Francisco, actually Berkeley, across the bay from San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And you asked about my education. I'm sorry. Did you want me just to go on from there? My relationship to His Eminence? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
So from my understanding, the original monastery was in Ohio, I think, right?
That is correct. Actually, though, to be technically correct, the original monastery was in Southern California, outside of San Bernardino, in a suburb named Highland.
Uh-huh.
His Eminence had property from his family there, and it was very small. It was basically a lot, a quarter of an acre, I think, something like that. And it had a couple buildings on it. We repurposed one building into serve as a chapel, and the Brotherhood lived there for 2 years, 76 through 78. Then we moved to Ohio.
Okay.
And that's, yes, and there we, from 78 to the end of 82, we were in Ohio.
Uh-huh.
And finally, we moved back to the West Coast, up here in far, far Northern California, really not far from the Oregon border, where we are, in 83.
How far is that from Platina?
It is, as the crow flies, I believe it's about 150 miles, somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 to 150 miles. It's the path there is not easy. If you take basically mountain roads to try to go as straight as possible, it takes you about, I think, a good 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And alternatively, you can kind of go backwards to an interstate, I-5, which is the main artery running through the state of California, Oregon, and Washington, and go south there to Redding, and then from Redding go back west into the mountains. So either way, it's about 3 hours away, but it's only, I think it's actually closer to 100 miles as the crow flies.
Yeah, that's not bad. So being that close to Platina, was there any relationship like with Father Seraphim Rose? Was he any influence on why it went from Ohio to Etna?
Yes, he was. Yes, he was a strong influence on that. We did have a strong relationship. His Eminence had been a a long correspondent with Father Seraphim. In fact, in the years that I knew him at Princeton, he was engaged in a very lengthy correspondence with him. He was an intermediary between Father Seraphim at that time and Father George Florovsky. He kept writing to His Eminence, asking him to pose questions of various kinds to Father George, picking his brain, as it were, on all kinds of subjects, for reasons that His Eminence never really fully understood. Father George did not want to correspond with Father Seraphim directly.
Interesting.
He was no longer part of the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia at the time. He had been with them for a while, but he was directly under Constantinople. And it may have been his he did not like what he called politics in the church. He tried to stay away from jurisdictional issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that at that time Metropolitan Chrysostomos had any motivation to kind of press him on that front. He was far more interested in his academic work, you know.
Mm-hmm.
At any rate, that correspondence continued over the decades, and so into the 90s, into the 80s, with our move back to Ohio, we were still in contact with Platina. That correspondence had been going on through the 70s, pardon me, to backtrack, with Father Seraphim. It continued into the 80s. Father Seraphim actually visited us in Ohio at the monastery there.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
Yeah. I believe in 82. At the time, we were already making plans to move back west, which was for complicated reasons. But one of the important reasons was His Eminence's health. He only had basically one functioning lung. He'd had very bad emphysema as a young man, as an athlete. He was very athletic in high school, but various things contributed to the kind of the advancing of that disease. So humid climates, especially humid climates, were very, very difficult for him. He was basically crippled in Ohio by health issues. And his doctors said, you know, you need to get back to a drier climate if you really want to get to find some kind of cure for this or some kind of solution for it. That and other reasons had convinced us that we really should move back to the West Coast, although we were not convinced that we needed to be, as it were, in Platina's orbit here. But we were actually on the West Coast when Father Seraphim fell critically ill. We heard about it. We joined the small, I guess you could say, a little community that had assembled in the hospital around him, and we were there when he died. We stayed with him for his last 2 days of his life. Participated in the funeral with Ladika Anthony, Father Herman, and basically that very powerful event convinced us that we needed to be closer in our move to Platina. Father Herman appealed to us to do exactly that. He was devastated, of course, by the loss of Father Seraphim. He wanted strong allies, as it were, to help him continue his work. He was trying to figure out, you know, how his mission was going to change or continue. And he saw it as providential that we were considering all this at the time, and we did as well. And so we resolved, well, we would, as it were, try to stay within an easy driving range, as it were, of Platina. We would focus our search in that way. And one thing led to another, and ultimately we did settle in Etna. That search took us about more than 6 months before we actually purchased the property.
Yeah, right before we came on today, I actually have, if I can see here, it is the, I don't know if, can you see that? We actually have.
Oh, sure.
The photo.
Yes, yeah.
So that is, and there's you. We can tell because you're very tall.
Yeah. So
there's
with His Eminence, right?
His Eminence and Father Seraphim. Do you know who
actually,
this priest is here?
He's only an archimandrite in that photo.
Oh,
His
okay.
consecration came later. I'm sorry.
Uh-huh.
Pardon me if I put my, yes, sure. That's Father Alexei Young, now
Oh, okay.
higher monk Ambrosios.
Very, very nice. So it was Archimandrite then, Archimandrite Chrysostomos, was he actually serving the funeral?
He actually, yes, he did. Now, this was not, I do not believe that this was during the funeral ceremony. I believe this is a Trisaion probably that he celebrated before the funeral.
Okay.
Yeah, but he did serve at the funeral. Yes, both of us did. At
Okay.
Vladika Anthony's invitation, and participated in the, I think there's a picture that's public too of the burial with us actually at the gravesite.
Believe somewhere there is. I gotta track that down. So there was a, like you said, there was a close relationship with Father Seraphim, and
Yes, and it continued with Father Herman. Yes, but historically, it had gone on for much longer with Father Seraphim. Father Seraphim is the one that as Emmons wrote. I mean, we had Father Herman had actually visited Philly, and they were very deeply impressed by him. And Father Seraphim did not.
Okay.
He had never been abroad. I mean, never been to Greece, as far as I knew.
Was there ever a during that relationship? Well, presumably Father Seraphim had already been a higher monk, and of course you two were already clergy. Did you guys ever serve liturgy together, or was that not? Were they not in communion yet?
No,
Okay.
we did not. We did.
Okay.
There had never been an opportunity.
Okay.
And yes, the during this period after 1974, I believe it was 74 or 75, as you know. I was very pleased that you, by the way, that you published, that you got your hands on and published the actual dating, the actual ukaz, that the directive from signed by Metropolitan Vitale. Yeah, yeah, for the directive that basically that they were to that the you're gonna have to help me with this. I have to think again about that. I saw that text.
The coming into communion again, if I'm recalling. I forget too. I've written so much and write so much.
No, this was the continuation of the basically the non-concelebration directive.
Oh, okay. Yeah. The figure out your stuff and then we'll.
Exactly. Yeah.
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 So for those that don't know, there was a period in the 70s where ROCOR, although they can correct me if I'm wrong, ROCOR stopped concelebrating with Old Calendarists because of certain issues that happened in Europe that were beyond pretty much everybody else's control. And they said, figure out your stuff and then we'll come into communion. They did not call Old Calendar schismatics. They did not call us apostates or not Orthodox, et cetera, et cetera. Is that correct?
That is correct. And the order was strictly observed, as best I know. Although you should actually ask Bishop Ambrose about this. Was strictly observed at a hierarchical level. At a clerical level, they were far more lenient. They would allow, as long as it wasn't published and broadcast too loudly, they would allow concelebration, or wink, as it were, at concelebration here. But the official directive was, yes, that we are going to refrain from communing with any one jurisdiction or one group of old calendarists until, yes, as you said, you figure things out and harmonize relations and ideally come under one leadership, which is what they wanted, and was of course why they got involved with the Matthewites too, hoping to remedy that schism. But that certainly backfired, as your readers probably know.
Yeah. So unfortunately today in ROCOR and MP, and there's other among some of the conservative new calendarists, there's this idea that in Father Seraphim Rose, there's a Father Seraphim Rose pre-1975 Father Seraphim Rose, and there's a post-1975 Father Seraphim Rose. Because of the way his letters are written, he's very pro-Old Calendarist in his letters. And then Boston comes onto the scene and his attitude changes. And there's people saying, well, after a certain period, after 1975, his attitude changed toward all old calendarists and he rejected them. Whereas was that his attitude? Are you familiar with that? Or was that just because, was he reacting because of the stuff that was going on between Boston and everybody else?
He had, of course, a very hard time of things with Boston, as you know. There was quite a bit of controversy, polemics between the two groups over the Toll Howe issues and the soul sleep issues and so on. And I do think that embittered him in some ways, though he was discreet and did not associate that with or lump all old calendarists together.
Mm-hmm.
He sponsored, I believe, in I think it was in 1980, an issue. It was of the Orthodox Word that featured Metropolitan Cyprian.
Yeah.
His visit to Romania, his report on the Romanian old calendarists, but also his own writings, in which he talks about the problem of super correctness in the church, which, by the way, aligns very nicely with our Metropolitan's continuing message about being wary with respect to the temptation from the right. It's the same phenomenon. And Metropolitan Cyprian wrote very eloquently about that, and Father Seraphim was quite pleased by that message and very happy to promote it. And it was during that time that I think we had our most fruitful correspondence with him, Metropolitan Chrysostomos, that is, with Father Seraphim. So that is definitely an incorrect characterization of Father Seraphim's thinking. It was sophisticated. He could discern between the different factions within the old calendar struggle.
Yeah.
And in fairness, the Boston community was not, really a part of the old calendar struggle. They mostly came out of the New Calendar Church. They have absolute legitimate reasons. They for a while they carried on a very historic witness and struggle, but they had no right to, as it were, claim representation of the old calendar movement, which was obviously, understandably, in Greece.
Yeah.
Now they had some contacts there, and a couple of I think that a couple of people affiliated with them in Greece, but by no means did they represent the movement.
Yeah, we do have the digital Orthodox Word from 62 to 82. As I don't know if you know, it's digitally archived, so we can see that all those there is a lot of Seraphim Rose's pro old calendars, Romanian old calendars, Greek old calendars. So, so that trying to divide his personalities into a pre-75 and a post-75 toward old calendars is largely untrue. And there's this idea online that Father Seraphim, because he was so isolated in Platina, did not know what was going on in Greece, which is why he accepted the old calendarists. That's something that's going on today, but we know there's an article that he posted that he wrote in Orthodox Word called "The Zealots of Mount Athos."
That's right.
So it's very. I'm just glad that we can actually get that out there, that he was very discerning. So from your experience, he was very intelligent, right?
Extremely so. Now, I only met him once when he came and visited us in Ohio. Well, of course, on his deathbed, but he wasn't able to communicate at that time.
Yeah, Metropolitan Chrysostomos had all the.
Right, he had the continuing correspondence with him, and I do believe that Father Seraphim also had some exchanges directly with the monastery in Philly, so that would have been through Metropolitan Ambrose. But you really need to pick his brain about that.
Did you say Father Seraphim Rose went to the Old Calendarist Monastery in Romania, or did I mishear?
No, he did not. He did not. As far as I know, he didn't travel abroad.
Oh, okay.
I never heard of him. I for sure, well, pardon me. I know, at least as far as my experience represents reality, I never
Mhm.
heard of him having visited Philly or Greece.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've
Um,
never heard that either. I was just curious.
yeah, and the same thing with respect to Romania.
Hmm.
Now, he may have gone to Europe for some reason during his, his school days or his college days. I don't know, or the days before he converted. It's perfectly
Hmm.
possible. But as far as I know, he really was, a genuine recluse. He loved his hermitage there in Platina.
Hmm.
I don't know if you've ever been to it. It's very
I'm not.
austere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could pick up fractions of that or elements of that and just and plant them in Mount Athos, and they'd be perfectly at home, as it were. And he
Hmm.
wanted it that way. He did not really. They intentionally moved to that remote area,
Yeah.
which initially had no power, no phone lines, no, very difficult road up to the monastery. Even when I
Mhm.
visited there in the 80s, and of
Yeah.
course they'd been there already, I think, 2 decades.
Yeah. That
Um,
was one of the major questions I had is Father Seraphim's attitude towards old calendars, and to know that he knew very distinctly the differences between Matthewite, Floronites, uh,
yes.
Boston, etc. Um, so I'm wondering now about, so there was that when Etna moved, and then there was the Father Seraphim Rose period, and then we really come down to like 1990s, 2000s. Um, so you were part of the Synod in Resistance, correct?
That is correct. We always were.
Uh-huh.
And I will say that initially, uh, Father Herman appealed to Metropolitan Cyprian
Hmm.
to release then Archimandrite Chrysostomos and our brotherhood
Uh-huh.
to him, to his oversight, even though he wasn't a hierarch, but to his, as it were, his network, his
Hmm.
extended community. And he did have I mentioned an orbit. There are a number of mission communities that were established and were more or less directly overseen by Platina. He would travel and visit them, speak at conferences and things like that, and the clergy or the laity there were very much aligned with Platina, considered
Uh-huh.
themselves to be part of that that faction within the diocese, the Western diocese here.
Hmm. What
Now
was
that did not happen. That happened. By the way, that appeal happened without our knowing, without our Archimandrite Chrysostomos then knowing
mhm.
that he had directly approached Metropolitan Cyprian and requested this release.
Interesting.
And he was mortified when it happened, because Metropolitan Chrysostomos, sorry, then Archimandrite Chrysostomos, was absolutely deeply devoted to Metropolitan Cyprian. It was a
Hmm.
very faithful spiritual son, and anybody who knows Metropolitan Cyprian will know that was something he talked about all the time. What a paradigmatic uh, monk, spiritual child, even fellow hierarch he was, who still continued that relationship of obedience, trust. He confessed to him all his life, etc.
Hmm.
What he how close a spiritual child he was. So Metropolitan Chrysostomos, sorry, Archimandrite Chrysostomos then, was deeply
Hmm.
upset when he learned of this appeal. We learned of it from Philly,
Uh-huh.
and so he had to, of course, uh, in a pastorally responsible way, approach Father Herman and say, "Look, I'm touched that you want this, but there's no way in the world I would ever do this, and
Hmm.
I would never betray Metropolitan Cyprian, and there's no reason we can't continue our collaboration with nevertheless being parts of uh, sister churches used in the loose sense. We were, as you know, the ROCOR was not yet in communion with the old calendar, any old
Hmm.
calendar community.
Yeah. So
So
during, oh, go ahead, go ahead.
yes, we did. We did preserve. We did our best to preserve relations then there for a while. Now, as you probably know, things went very bad between Father Herman and his local hierarch, Archbishop Anthony.
Mm-hmm.
And he was ultimately defrocked and fled.
Yeah.
And went to a very Avagante Orthodox Old Calendar group. Ultimately,
Yes.
his community ended up with the Serbians, as you know.
Yeah, that was an unfortunate incident.
It was a tragic incident, yes, and that's not the purpose of our conversation here. But that didn't just happen out of the blue. Metropolitan Chrysostomos kind of saw that coming, or Archimandrite Chrysostomos saw that coming. He'd already heard the rumblings from various individuals that were trustworthy and tried to intervene, actually, and tried his best to help, as were many sincere and concerned individuals, tried to intervene to help accomplish a reconciliation between Father Herman and Archbishop Anthony, to no avail.
During that time, so even during this time, was the relationship between, even though we weren't in communion officially, was ROCOR and the old Calendarists, were they on good terms on the West Coast from your experience?
Yes. Oh, yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. We would celebrate with local ROCOR clergy, Father Herman, Father Alexei, and others, as I mentioned, in the Patina orbit that would come through without any problem. But mind you, none of us was a hierarch.
So it was the hierarchs where it was, so clergy fine, or priests and deacons fine.
Yeah.
Bishops not so much.
Yeah.
And that was in 60s or 70s, 80s.
That's in the 80s. We moved here in 83. Yes.
Okay.
So that's in the. Of course, it was complicated by the fact that this rupture happened between Archbishop Anthony and Platina.
Yeah.
Father Alexei moved away from Etna about the same time. Moved back east. Actually, moved to the west. Went to Colorado first, and then finally back east. Archbishop Anthony actually I'm going to have to think about this, but I'll leave it at that. We certainly had cordial relations with him, very cordial relations with him. And he knew of his clergy concelebrating with us, and he didn't have a problem with it.
Yeah, because the ROCOR recognized them as Orthodox.
Yeah. There was something similar happening, I believe, with Archbishop Peter's clergy in Astoria.
Yeah, that was, the lines were not as crystal clear as people would like to like it to be.
And there were clergy from Western Europe that would travel, I know for a fact, would travel to Philly and also celebrate with them. Though again, they would do it, they would not broadcast it. They realized that it could cause problems for those clergy or the hierarchs who were, as it were, winking at the problem, at the phenomena.
Yeah.
And so it was just everybody was discreet about it, but it certainly happened. So, and in most cases without any objections from the local hierarchy.
Yeah, I can imagine. From reading as much as I have about old ROCOR, it didn't seem like it was too problematic. So that brings us kind of into the ROCOR actually enters in communion with the Synod and Resistance. That was, so can you tell us about that whole approaching of ROCOR to the Synod and Resistance, and from your experience, why do you think ROCOR chose them to go into communion with?
Well, to correct what you just said there, in truth, we approached ROCOR.
Okay.
So they did not approach us and say, hey, would you like, of all the old calendar groups, would you like to join with us? Metropolitan Cyprian was very well. He was a deep thinker.
Mhm.
As you know, from some of his publications, and certainly from his interactions with fellow hierarchs, he was very concerned to reconcile the differences, find some means to unite the strugglers against what he felt was the bona fide issue of the day, which was ecumenism.
Mhm.
He thought the issue of grace in the mysteries of the innovators was an unfortunate distraction or temptation for the movement. As you know, first it set off the Matthewites, and then it was a continuing problem in the other remaining Old Calendar factions. Saint Chrysostomos, clearly in either his ecclesiastical acts and or his writings, expressed different opinions.
Yes.
In his writings, to be fair to the saint, in his writings he was consistent. He argued, he made this distinction between potential versus actual schism among the New Calendarists.
Mhm.
He did not want to sign documents that denied mysteriological grace among the innovators, but nevertheless felt that the unified witness of the Old Calendar struggle was far more important than this issue, and was willing to give in on it and sign documents. Metropolitan Cyprian felt very strongly. Now, mind you, he came from the state church. I think you know that. He joined the Old Calendar struggle in the early 60s. He did so with the blessing of his elder, Blessed Philotheos Servachos, who had told him, yes, you are right in your issues of conscience. He'd been very open with them. I don't disagree with you. On the one hand, on the other hand, he strongly admonished him not to give in to the fanatic elements of the Old Calendar community. He was savvy. He understood, the various dynamics at work in the movement. So Metropolitan Cyprian had come from the state church, and he of course had known many virtuous personalities, Elder Philotheos among them, of course, in the New Calendar movement, and had his own experience, as it were, to confirm the understanding that it was premature to deny mysteriological grace among the innovators. However toxic, poisonous, heretical, perhaps some of the pronouncements might have been from the ecumenical patriarchate, his associated hierarchy and academics and so on, and so on. And so he had written his own ecclesiastical theses on this subject, trying to basically to take the argument on it about these issues on it, to redirect it, to get it more theologically oriented. He always maintained those theses were heuristic. They were meant to promote a dialogue. They were never pronounced in a dogmatic way.
Yeah.
And certainly, to be fair to His Eminence, Metropolitan Cyprian of blessed memory, he understood that it was a moving target in a certain way. In other words, what was happening in the New Calendar community was not just static. It wasn't just that they, had made one pronouncement and were sitting back and done nothing about it.
It was ongoing, constant.
It was ongoing and evolving. They're getting bolder and bolder. They're developing new ideas and so on. And what may have been valid at that time, he did not argue was needed to be codified as a perennial, as a permanent position with respect to among the Old Calendarists. That for now and forever, that we can say that the New Calendarists have grace in their mysteries, are only potentially in schism, and whatever. Alien members of the church, but all these ideas that he offered for debate. Well, he found for sure the most sympathy for these kinds of ideas in ROCOR. There was a flux of people that came through the monastery in VV. It had such a reputation, and he had such a reputation as having such spiritual maturity, insight, gifts, charismatic gifts for obviously for the service of the church. And so, and I think by God's providence, a lot of these people came through there, and it included Russian hierarchs. Archbishop Anthony of Los Angeles, I went there. Other ROCOR hierarchs came and visited him. Metropolitan Loris, others who were traveling and made it a point to stop and talk with them. And so he knew that there was sympathy for this, and that it was more, as it were, the discussion would probably could possibly bear more fruit among ROCOR. But I would say that he also was equally inspired by the premise that basically the old calendar mysteries in modern times came from ROCOR, that therefore any attempt to reunite the old calendar communities must look back to that source. So they restored, as you know, they restored our hierarchical orders. At the time we had none, and we were obviously highly vulnerable at that time. And by God's providence, and the inspired, courageous acts of a few individual hierarchs, contrary to the sentiment of their synod at the time, the prevailing majority, let's say the majority opinion at their time, nevertheless reached out and did this extraordinary thing. Which all the more, in my opinion, shows how providential that action was. At any rate, he felt that the path to unity among the old calendarists was actually a return to ROCOR. Let's go back where we came from. In essence, he said, and he communicated this very clearly to the other groups. Let's go back to where we came from, reunite with you, do what is necessary for you. There's dialogue has been unfruitful amongst ourselves. Do what you have to do to reestablish liturgical communion with ROCOR, and we'll meet there. So he did. So he appealed to them for a period of about 2 years. And it basically was a dialogue. He wrote a lengthy appeal letter in 1990. I believe the first one may have been in 1992. Metropolitan Ambrose could certainly confirm the dates on these for you, but I know that it was well before the Union in 1994. And the first responses from the synod were basically negative. But there was no, how would you say, there was no compelling logic in their answers, and Metropolitan Cipriano understood that and went right back to the table and said, your statement that we should unite among ourselves before we appeal to you. Do you want me to unite with people who in fact have condemned you? Good
point.
That's
a good point.
And then talk about their theology as well, and that, are you willing to endorse such a theology? And if not, then you understand why I am not currently united with them, though God grant that someday. But in trying to correct the error of our past actions or misunderstandings or errors that separated us. And he was willing to certainly be repentant, express. Well, he wasn't personally responsible for the actions of the old calendarists that had, of course, offended ROCOR. Reordination of one of their clergymen and other things that offended them.
It was one of the references I'm talking about.
So he very strongly engaged in this private dialogue. It wasn't published, but nevertheless, a lengthy period of correspondence with them, pushing them, saying, give me a reason why we should not be in union.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you the reasons why we should be in union. And, let's work it out. And finally, they pointed to commission, and the recommendation was unanimous. And those hierarchs were asked, and so that's 1994, pardon me, right on the heels of the glorification of St. John. And of course, Metropolitan Cyprian was there for that, as was Metropolitan Foti of Bulgaria. And as were, I'm going to have to think a minute about Romanian hierarchy. I don't know about that.
I think we have a.
Now we did not come, since they had not, the actual opening of communion happened, I think, somewhat. The synod was right after, was going to reconsider this and readjudicate the matter. Happened right after it.
Yeah.
Metropolitan Foti was actually present at those deliberations, and that's when the union was announced or decided. Pardon me.
So, and that leads me into my. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, Metropolitan Cyprian actually was not in San Francisco for that during that council meeting of ROCOR. He was in Australia. He'd already prearranged to come to the United States for the sake of the glorification, go on to Australia for a pastoral visit, and then come back. And it was when he came back that that he learned about it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that brings me into the next interesting question that we have. We have photos. I'd like to bring these up. Is in 1996. Share screen. So 1996, we have, and I love these. Like I was telling you earlier before we started the interview, it's instead of "Where's Waldo," it's "Where's Bishop Auxentios," because you are everywhere in our photos on ROCOR from, for so many decades. You're in these photos, and there was this one. I think you are there as a younger man next to his Metropolitan Chrysostomos. This was the 1996 consecration of then Bishop Gabriel.
Yes, in Jordanville, sure.
In Jordanville, and who is now a Archbishop Gabriel of Montreal and the sitting member of the ROCOR MP Synod. So can you talk to us about this? And because this is very interesting. This is very interesting.
We were invited. By Vladika, by three hierarchs. Vladika Vitaldi obviously signed off on this. Archbishop Loris, who was then the resident at Jordanville, and we knew him. We had met him several times and had good talks with him and so on. And then Bishop. No, I think he was already Archbishop Hilarion.
There he is there on the very, very far right.
Right. And Vladika Anthony of San Francisco, although he was as it were, kind of a visitor just like us for this event. And I don't know why he was back east at that time. But the other three hierarchs had reached out to us, and I think it may have been through Archbishop Hilarion that he mentioned that Vladika Vitali and Archbishop Loris had both blessed for this, and he would be very happy if we could participate in this event, in this very happy event, and so we did. We made travel arrangements to get to Jordanville. That's a long way for us, as you understand.
Yes.
And came there and took part in the consecration, the vigil the night before, and then the actual laying on of hands. Yeah, there you can see his Bishop Gabriel is, I'm sure, kneeling in front of us there. I think.
Yeah, I think there is. You're the tallest one, so you're easy to spot.
Yeah,
they're there.
But that's Archbishop Chrysostomos right in front of me, blocking most of the view of me. Yes.
Yeah, his vestments you can tell from.
Yeah,
that's the wrong one. You can tell his vestments are.
And there was a banquet afterwards. I remember. and we of course participated in that. It was a very happy event, and we got to know Bishop Gabriel more in this. I mean, we had met him before. We had met him in New York City. At that time he was, I don't think he was an archimandrite. I think he was just a higher monk, and in the synod offices, and we were very, and I want to say that we had also gotten together in Astoria, but I can't swear to that. That may have been later. Yeah, because he became, as you know, the secretary of the synodal offices there, and was resident in Astoria for a good while.
Yeah.
Before, and I don't think he, although his family was from Australia, I don't think he ever was relocated to Australia. I think they had talked about doing that, but I think he ended up staying in Manhattan because Bishop Hilarion, had been reappropriated for Australia and governance of the church there. But I may be wrong about that too.
I'm not sure about that either. I don't remember. So I think this is I put this in my book. I mean, this is very significant event. I put it in my book. I don't know if you've seen mine.
I have seen your book, and I've read a fraction of it. And forgive me, I will read all of it because it's absolutely crucial material, highly relevant to our ongoing struggle.
You lived through it, so it's all right. You're exempt. Yeah, but I put it in there on page 46. I thought that was a super, and I'm glad. I know you're the one who sent me this photo a few months back. I think even before I came into the GOC. This is a very significant event because now in our present day, after the fact of 2007, there's the new era of ROCOR MP is you're schismatic, and this attitude, and this kind of goes to show why history is so important, why we need to learn our own history, because you can't say we're schismatic, but then your current hierarch is on the synod was consecrated by two of ours. It's very interesting historical reference, but it was so after that relationships with ROCOR were hierarchical concelebrations frequently, or
they were, and I think to be historically accurate, you have to more or less point to more or less two periods between the time of our union, 1994, and ROCOR's union with Moscow in 2007.
Yeah,
and basically things come to a pretty much a halt with the elevation of Metropolitan Loris, with the death with the retirement of Metropolitan Vitali and the appointment of Vladika Loris.
So in 2001,
2004 to 2001, the interactions are frequent and joyful, and we think are absolutely beneficial for the welfare of the respective churches, the ROCOR and not only the Old Calendar Church in Greece under Metropolitan Kyprian, but also the Old Calendar community in Bulgaria under Metropolitan Foti, and of course the Old Calendar Church in the Old Calendar Church in Bulgaria under Metropolitan Foti, and the Old Calendar Church in Romania under Metropolitan Vlasi.
Yeah,
there are several concelebrations in which you have hierarchs from all four churches present. The most notable being the one that's best documented being the one in 96 as well.
I have
in New York City. So you have a picture of all four primates: Metropolitan Vitali, Metropolitan Kyprian, Metropolitan Foti. I think then at the time still Bishop Foti, though I'm not sure about that, as well as Metropolitan Vlasi.
So it wasn't.
So
this
that's at the
here.
7th. No. This is the 700th anniversary of the discovery of the Kursk root icon, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
And in just a second, I did a little bit of refreshing of my memory, or tried to anyway, with a review of articles in Orthodox tradition. So that's, pardon me. So that's in 1995, December
Okay.
of December 9th of 1995, 9th and 10th. So, and that was in the Synod Cathedral in New York. And am I able to screen share in this broadcast, or?
I don't think so.
So I will quickly shoot you the
It's a 1995 edition.
well, wait a minute, just 1 second.
Okay.
No, that's not it. Yeah. Okay. They're all seated there, but okay. So let me. Okay, I just sent you the extract from Orthodox tradition.
Okay.
That photo is, somebody else took another one, which we ultimately were happier with, in which all the hierarchs are standing. They're all seated, but nevertheless, you see, except for Bishop Foti, who is standing.
Okay.
That's
When
on,
it comes
that's on
up,
page, that's on
there it
page
is.
62 at the top of that. It's the second page in that extract.
Oh, there it is right there. Let me go ahead and.
Yeah, so that's black and white too. Somewhere there's another original for that. And then there's a second picture actually from inside the altar.
So there's Archbishop Anthony, Metropolitan Cyprian, Metropolitan Vitali, Metropolitan Blasi, Archbishop Laris, and Bishop Foti of Bulgaria.
Right, just you see him in profile there. Correct.
So there is. Oh, this is the photo. I was just gonna. Oh, okay. I was just gonna show you that. Yeah. So this was the banquet after this concelebration here.
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. I want to take you down memory lane real quick. I found this photo in a recently book that I bought. I don't know if you remember that. There you are.
I've certainly seen this photo. I only faintly remember this event. And it's an interesting photo because it looks like there's a kind of something going on between Metropolitan Chrysostomos and Archbishop Anthony there.
Yeah, it looks like he's like poking him with the staff to get his attention there.
Get his attention for some reason, and maybe he wants him to reposition somewhere else. And I think it was they were actually very fond of one another, and I think it was probably something comical. But at any rate, yes, we were there. I think this.
Go ahead.
Well, this is not the concelebration in the Synod headquarters, obviously. We're now in another location. We're in Jordanville.
Yeah, this is Jordanville. There's you, there's Metropolitan Chrysostomos there. And I believe here, this is my spiritual father who brought me into ROCOR. There's Metropolitan Vitali, Metropolitan Laris. Holding the Kursk icon is now Bishop Luke of Jordanville. There's Metropolitan Hilarion, Archbishop Gabriel. There's Bishop George Schaefer in the background as a priest.
Yeah. So this actually may have been after Vladika Gabriel's consecration.
Maybe. Oh, I think you're right. Oh no, this is the 50th. Were you there for the 50th?
Yeah, that's right. The 50th anniversary of Jordanville. You're right. We were there for that. Okay. That would
So,
explain the presence of the cursed root icon too. That it being brought in for the event. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen this photo gallery. So, oh, there you are again. So there's, like I said, there's always art. There's always a Bishop Auxentios in the background somewhere.
Yeah,
So
that's Vladika Ilarion there.
there's Hilarion there.
Right.
Metropolitan Cyprian,
Yeah, I
Metropolitan
have.
Chrysostomos.
Yeah,
Do you actually remember
and
where this photo was taken?
that is in Philly. That's the old cathedral in Philly, the old church, which was destroyed in the earthquake in 1999, and has since ultimately had to be demolished. It wasn't actually destroyed. It was damaged beyond repair. There were structural cracks that appeared and so on, and engineers said that evaluated and said there was just no saving it. And at that point, Metropolitan Cyprian decided, well, it was providential because he had long known that he needed to build a bigger church.
Oh, okay.
And so it was demolished, and on the same spot, the new cathedral was built.
I was wondering where that photo did come from, because someone did just send me that recently. It's very interesting. So
we had I would say at least a dozen celebrations in those 5-6 years, either here in North America or in Europe, between our respective hierarchy. Metropolitan Cyprian actually was visited by Vladika Evthimi of Siberia. He came to Greece, celebrated with him there. This 95, 96, somewhere in there. And Metropolitan Cyprian felt inspired to reciprocate and had to go to Moscow, and I think by rail. I'm not sure exactly. It was a long trip anyway to return the visit, and went and visited and was very, very impressed by
awesome. So during the start, so this style, we're getting into getting into the mid 2000s. We see in 2000.
Things attenuated right from the get-go with Metropolitan Loris's appointment. Now, I will say that he was very respectful towards us. But obviously something was afoot. We received a memorandum, and you really want to talk to Metropolitan Ambrose about this. But I remember specifically that we had received a kind of a communique from, I believe, directly from Metropolitan Loris, in which he said, we're going through some internal issues, and we would ask you basically to not intrude on our, it was put in a very pastorally sensitive way, but nevertheless, basically not to appear at our churches, to push yourselves onto us until we can resolve these matters. And it spooked us, as you can imagine. Yeah. Well,
he didn't say what it was.
He didn't say what it was. No, but it became very obvious shortly, because then there were various things going on. Vladika Mark had, went to Russia, and other things happened. And then there was actually, of course, noise about dialogues going on, and Putin made his famous appearance, at the States with them, and we saw, of course, the writing on the wall. Nevertheless, we wrote a number of letters to Vladika Loris. And by the way, I will say that in those first communiques, right after his appointment, in which he responsibly he did reach out to us, and he gave us a very strong assurance that quote unquote ROCOR would preserve its course.
I do remember reading those letters that he sent to they're actually archived. I have them archived. The Romanian Metropolitan and actually this is after the Union. He sent these letters that they will remain on course. But so that was mid 2000s. That was what, 2000. Putin came in 2003, and what happened then around? So the Senate started seeing.
Yes, we saw. irrefutable evidence, as it were, that they were strongly considering union, and we made a number of appeals to them that they reconsider, that they engage us in some kind of discussion and talk to us about their logic, and allow us to respond, because of course it would have consequences. We simply just wouldn't sit back passively and say, oh, well, that's fine, and continue as we were. We obviously, it would force a rupture of communion.
Yes.
And that was for us unthinkable. I mean, we valued it highly and considered ourselves to have a very strong moral, spiritual mandate, as it were, to preserve it as best we could, and not to let something divide our unity. But they continued their course, and as you know, that was a traumatic event for all of them as well. To be fair, that just didn't happen easily. They didn't just glide into that. That there was a lot of in-house debate, a lot of contention, a lot of false information, in my opinion, false assurances, and it was what it was. Now, I will say that we considered ourselves to have been unable to preserve liturgical concelebration and union. It basically necessitated a rupture, and they'd made it very clear to us that they had been told by Moscow that they had to break relations with us. That was part of the deal, and we had that in writing. That they weren't, as it were, going to be able to frame this in such a way as we did something to break the union. They had to do it, even though we knew we could not, in good conscience, maintain it if they were in union with the Moscow Patriarchate, a church that was deeply involved in the ecumenical movement, that had not properly repented of the Sergionistic problems, and so on. So we so with as they got closer and closer to the 2007 date, well before 2006, it was basically a fait accompli.
Yeah.
We knew they were never going to meet again with us, and we could not in good conscience say that we were, how would you say, we were still in union with this church.
Yeah. It was, so it was, as you said in prior, it was the writing was on the wall, and it was actually ROCOR that, as a mandate from Moscow, had to break communion with us, not vice versa.
Yes. But we had no choice but to, in essence, reciprocate. To recognize a de facto schism between us. Now we did conscientiously write them with appeals and explain to them that this was a change of course. Metropolitan Foti wrote an absolutely beautiful and really a patristic analysis of what had happened, and basically said that the Church of Russia came down from its cross, which is a frightful thing for any Christian to consider. We have to preserve our course, carrying our cross, or being on our cross, if we're really to be worthy of our calling. But we wrote them many appeals, which really fell silent. We did not get the debate or the real discussion that we wanted for this, to be able to ask what their apology was, get a good apology for them for their action, and why it was necessary, and so on. Now, individuals maintained good relations with us, and we were perfectly fine with that. You mentioned Archimandrite Luke, for example, Jordanville. He was always close and frequent in his conversations with us. Metropolitan Hilarion, for that matter, always maintained respectful communications with us. He teleconferenced me on the day of Metropolitan Chrysostomos's burial, right after the funeral. And that's as the first hierarch, the primate of the of the church, expressing his condolences, recalling his closeness with Metropolitan Chrysostomos. He concelebrated with him many times. They had known each other in Jordanville decades and decades ago, back from the 60s. Others, unfortunately, were not happy to even to acknowledge any kind of past relationship with us. One hierarch told somebody that they didn't know us and had never been to Etna, which was we have pictures of it, and I'm not going to go into any more particulars on that, but we have published pictures of it. It wasn't very smart, quite frankly.
Unfortunately, that's what I'm finding, in writing this book, and I'm writing a few others, and, my in-depth research in ROCOR. Once a photo is taken, it's taken, and it's there, so it will be found eventually. But you mentioned, just go ahead.
Well, I think you're wise to also to pull the various individuals who are involved in this or interview them. And again, strongly encouraging you to reach out to the other individuals I mentioned to you. Because with things like AI, they can not only can write would-be correspondence or whatever, but can, what do they call it, deep fakes, where you can actually create videos of people saying things that, of course, they've never done, never said. So I wouldn't be surprised if eventually we hear arguments. Those are just artificial forgeries, whatever you want to call them.
Forgeries. That's what.
So it's important that you interview the individuals as well. I think you're right to do that, and recall our remembrances of these times together. And ultimately, the world is getting to such a point that if people want to insist that white is black or whatever, well, they're gonna have a following. And we just have to, I think, do our best to maintain good Christian comportment, do our work with respect to our own spiritual work for the sake of our own enlightenment, that we truly do become sons of the light, so that we're not deceived by forgeries, by false witnesses, and so on, and that we're receptive to the truth, and that we can, so we can preserve it for posterity.
I did have go ahead.
No, that's it. Forgive me.
So after ROCOR broke communion with us at the Mandate of Moscow, the communion ended. But did ROCOR, to your knowledge or in your experience, ever say, like what's now going on in the history is, oh, you're schismatic, you're apostates, you're not in the church because you're old Calendarist? Did ROCOR ever, when they broke communion, did they ever say that?
To my knowledge, the only one who ever was so bold was Vladika Mark of Germany. And that's why you want to interview Archimandrite Alexis. He was the recipient of that.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah, and we were dumbfounded, because it was a how do they say, a pivot on a dime. He just overnight, having been so close to us, he was a willing concelebrant with us. He knew full well that we had done nothing actually to change our course. There was no pronouncement from our synod that he could look to, and say, you've done this wrongly or that, whatever. We maintained our course very, and I think very responsibly. It's obvious they knew that we were upset with their union with Moscow, but that said, we did not come out with a strong condemnation of them. We voiced our concerns. We said that, of course, in good conscience, we could not maintain communion anymore. So it was mutual, the cutting of relations. We weren't begging them to preserve relations in their new
status.
But we refrained from, how would you say, excessive polemics, or I mean, we felt we had to defend to our faithful, our course and explain to them what had happened, so that they wouldn't be upset or tempted by the circumstances, and see us, as it were, as to blame for this loss of a sister church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But we did our best to continue to communicate with them privately, individually, and maintain cordial relations. As I for sure, Archbishop Chrysostomos was probably Metropolitan Chrysostomos here in Etna did that. And actually a number of their hierarchs and certainly clergy did the same. They regretted it. They weren't happy about it, or they saw it as an unhappy consequence of maybe a necessary course of action, something like that.
Yeah. We do have here in this old photo is actually Archbishop Mark at the time celebrating with all the old calendarists. So to say it was,
and that actually, by the way, was before the union with the Synod and Resistance, the Metropolitan Cyprian. This is, I believe, and do you have a date on that photo?
I don't. I know it comes from the Orthodox tradition somewhere. I forget which volume, but
I'm pretty sure that this is in 92 or 93. And that's because they opened relations with the Romanians before the Bulgarians and the Greeks.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
But they had no problem. But as you can see there, I believe Metropolitan Cyprian is in that photo as well, because we had been in communion with the Romanians since 1980.
Yes, it says Bishop Gennady, Metropolitan Vlasi, Metropolitan Cyprian, Archbishop Mark, Bishop Demostheni, and Bishop Pachomi.
Yeah, so there, if you want to, you probably want to date that photo.
Okay.
And see if I'm right about that. But that shows, as to your point of whether or not, they had this, as it were, this idea that the old calendarists were untouchable, and that's not true. As there you see Vladika Mark celebrating with Metropolitan Cyprian, covering himself, as it were, by the fact that they were in communion with the Romanians.
That did cover a lot of history. That was my primary focus since I'm coming from ROCOR MP, and that's, I have a lot of people there that I still very much love. That history is been very interesting with me. My spiritual father was in Jordanville. He died before the Union, so he died. He died in communion with old calendarists. So it's an interesting history, and I'm glad that I was able to interview you. That was all the questions I did have, but I'm so glad I was able to interview you and get all these historical tidbits and confirmations that we see in writing, because we see the photos, but there's really we need that the person behind the photos to actually tell us what was going on, and very, very blessed that you gave us the time to do that.
Well, it was my pleasure. It was my pleasure. And I'm very grateful for your efforts. It's a worthy project. There are worthy candidates out there for interview. I don't know that I'm such a repository of useful information, but I confirm, obviously, the events behind those photos, and I certainly can confirm the good spirit that prevailed among the ROCOR hierarchy and clergy, that we met on frequent occasions, multiple locations, over a good period of time. It was the result of good efforts, I think, by virtuous souls in the past. St. John of San Francisco, Archbishop Leonti of Chile, Vladika Seraphim, others who were, instrumental in intervening for the sake of the survival of the old calendar church in Greece, and then, virtuous, good souls on both sides, as it were, that preserve those relations and work towards unity, despite some significant forces that were oppositional to that good end. And thank God that did bear fruit and united the churches for a significant period there for at the end of the century and the beginning of this century. And then thank God with the continuing community under Vladika Agafongo.
Yes, thank God.
We shouldn't, exactly. We should not belittle, even though, we lost a significant fraction of the majority of the ROCOR community to unity with Moscow. There were not only one hierarch, but a number of communities that could not in good conscience continue with it, and that either stayed with us or appealed to us. And certainly individual clergymen and lots of laity who understood it. And I would hope in the future even more, because it's not bearing, I think there's strong evidence that the ROCOR Moscow Patriarchate union, did not bear good fruit, or is not bearing good fruit. And the whole phenomenon of the bizarre justification of the war in Ukraine as a supposed, basically as a holy war.
Yeah.
Which frankly is a new theology for the Orthodox Church. Canonically, yes. people that murder in war, that people kill, soldiers that kill others in war, suffer a period of excommunication, regardless of the rightness of the cause. It could be to defend their very family. Nevertheless, they're excommunicated. And now we've got a patriarchate saying that basically they go straight to heaven.
It's very Islamic.
Yeah,
very Islamic.
And nobody's blushing or protesting. Well, there are actually a few souls who are, but they've been
defrosted already, though.
And that's right. They suffer themselves immediately if they do.
Yeah,
they're silenced.
It's kind of a neo-Sergianism almost. I'd say
it certainly is, and I think it's a perfectly valid argument how Sergianism is alive and well in Russia.
God forbid.
So God protect us from these influences and help us to maintain a good course, that we give a good witness to these people. And I'm very happy if you're concerned for them, because that's very important. We do this not out of some kind of triumphalism and just wanting to condemn others. God protect us from that. We're doing this to try to give a good witness to them and preserve the truth for their very sake.
Yeah.
Out of love.
That's why I put so much emphasis on preserving the history, because those who forget history are doomed to repeat it, as the saying goes. That's again and again. Before switching topics briefly, and before I let you go, I want to plug this book. If you're interested in the GOC, I know you were involved in this project, so this is the Facts about the GOC, Frequently Asked Questions about the Validity of the Church of the Genuine Orthodox Christians, and it's produced by the Center for Traditionalist Orthodox Studies in Etna.
Thank you. And I certainly, I happily blessed for this project. I cannot take credit for it, except for helping in some of the editing and fact checking and so on. And for that matter, actually, I thank all of my fellow hierarchs because they all reviewed it as well. We gave it a careful read. We had good discussions about clarifying some elements of it and so on, making sure that everybody was very pleased with it. So it was a collaborative effort in that review process. But Dr. Dimitri Alibertis, a faculty member here at the St. Photios Orthodox Theological Seminary, was the writer, the one who compiled it. Did the hard work of getting all the facts together, and I'm very pleased for it. I think its tone is very good. It's conciliatory. It's basically just as you say. It's concerned to get the truth out there, and let others decide. Let others decide for themselves. To know what. But yes, to preserve the truth, the facts of the various complicated phenomena associated
Yeah,
with the calendar struggle, its relationship to ROCOR, for that matter, and its opinion
that's
papers. And that's where your work is so important too.
so. These
Thank
two, if
you.
you're interested in the church, the genuine Orthodox Church, and you're interested in all this history is new to you, and you're just wondering why have I never heard this? Well, there's a reason you've never heard it. They don't want you to hear it. So get this book and get this book, and you'll learn a ton. Despota, it's been great to hear from you, and thank you for this interview. I will end the recording, but I'll talk to you here in a second. Your blessings and
God bless you, Victorious, and all your listeners, and may we preserve our unity and for the good of the Holy Orthodox Church.
thank you, Despota.